our
Dutch
Grand Prix F1 driver ratings. This video is sponsored by the wonderful people over at Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Hello everybody and welcome back to the P1 podcast with Matt and Tommy. We are here, the first driver ratings after the summer break. We have locked in our numbers, our opinions, our analysis, and we are ready for everybody to agree with every single one of our ratings. Isn't that right, Tom Bellingham?
It sure is. We have locked in our 100% correct, you can't disagree opinions, of course.
Facts, Tommy. They're facts.
Their
They're
factual
not
information are grades from 1 to 10 of every driver.
It certainly is. So let's just wait no further than right now and get straight into it. With Kevin Magnussen. Started from the pit lane, technically 20th, and finished the race in 18th. It is a 4 out of 10 for Kevin Magnussen from me. Could have even been lower. And the reason I'm giving him a 4, not a 5, because of course he started from the pit lane, so he was on the back foot from the get-go, is because he was the danger man once again. And I think that he got away with it. He was driving erratically, trying to help Nico Hülkenberg once again. I don't know how he's just become this mule where he just helps his teammate now. I feel like he's just kind of relaxed into that role within the team. I mean, Nico Hülkenberg, don't get me wrong, has been cooking, so I can understand why K-Mag would do that. But very, very fortunate to not have an almighty little crash. I say little, an almighty big crash around that final corner when he was lifting to try and slow down the pack behind him even more and got overtaken by 4 cars into turn 1, which is insane.
I've gone for a 3 out of 10 for Kevin Magnussen. Similar to Miami, not as extreme, but it is kind of embarrassing for him to basically just become this meme driver that will sacrifice his own race for the good of the team. I know it's playing the team game, but I think it takes it too far when you're, backing up the pack that much. And he's a far too good of a racing driver to be doing that, in my opinion. He shouldn't just be used as almost like a weapon or like a cheat code.
Is he that good of a driver?
Well, no, I'm not saying he's the next Ayrton Senna. I'm just saying that he's a good driver.
Too good.
Like,
he's K-Mag.
Well, he's far too good to be basically a joke of a driver, is what I'm saying, which is what he now is. And it's the twilight of his career, and he's basically just being used as a pawn. And went off as well for good measure. He did actually, and even though I believe technically, statistically, there were no yellow flags for the Zandvoort race, and yet my man was going across the gravel. Where was the yellow flag? Where was the yellow flag? That's because no one was coming up behind him because he was so rubbish.
I guess.
So there we go.
True, actually. Yeah, that was it. Okay, the fans gave K-Mag a 5. Wow. My goodness gracious me. Let's quickly chat about our sponsor for this video, Squarespace, a place where you can build a website with absolutely no coding knowledge required. What's better too is that you can create one for free and only start paying once you decide to go ahead and publish your website. There are thousands of drag and drop best-in-class templates to select from to allow your creativity to flow. I might just start making my Charles Leclerc dedicated fan page now. What's better yet is that you can continue to improve your website as well with the use of analytics to know what's working and what isn't. So what are you waiting for? Head to squarespace.com/P1 to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code P1. Let's go to Nico Hülkenberg. Started 12th and finished 11th.
I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Nico Hülkenberg. It could have been points. He shouldn't have really been up there in the first place. I think the Haas is nowhere near as good as it was at the start of the season. Hülkenberg, difficult weekend actually. For all his incidents that he had in practice, thought he was going to have a bit of a stinker, but he was so close to points, and to deliver that with all the kind of politics going on in the team as well. I think it is an impressive performance, and maybe unlucky that everyone finished, otherwise he'd been maybe rewarded with a point.
Yes, I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Nico as well. I think it was a very good race for him, just missing out on the points. Went for an incredibly aggressive strategy, pitting, I think, on lap 14 from the mediums, and then went all the way to the end of the race on the hard tyres. And he said after the race that he didn't feel as though the strategy was right, but still, I think a great drive from Nico, and you thought maybe 10, 15 laps from the end he might be able to hold on for a point, but no, Gasly and Alonso got through. The fans gave Nico a 7. Zhou Guanyu started 17th, finished 20th. Going to go for a 2 out of 10 for Zhou Guanyu. And I will not have anybody say that he had a slow pit stop. It was 2.4. I know he had 2 stops, and we were literally live streaming. And we were like, what is Zhou Guanyu doing? And I saw a Zhou Guanyu defender in the chat, so did you, Tommy, that said that was a slow pit stop. And we went, no, that was 2.4 seconds.
So the fastest stop of the year.
It really was. I mean, they're pitting more often than not, I think, Stake, just in general. But yes, 33 seconds behind his teammate. Just slow in qualifying, 1.1 seconds off of his teammate there as well. And you do want, he said after the race, this weekend has been tough for us. We were quite far off compared to our main rivals. But Bottas was getting stuck in at the start. He was on the tail end of the points, I think, at one point, maybe 12th or 13th, fighting away. And Zhou, just another really poor performance. I am giving him a 2 because the car is rubbish. And am I going to give a gargantuan difference of a grade because there are some other teammates that were nearly 30-odd seconds behind each other? So yeah, that's why I've given him a 2, because he is driving a tractor, but it's still not good enough.
I've also given Zhou Guanyu a 2. Thinking about a 1, but he keeps it clean at least and hasn't had accidents and is
he's going slowly.
The car. Yeah, exactly. And he's never going sort of. Well, the Sauber upgrades is not exactly costing them because they don't seem to be improving. If not, they're getting worse. So, yeah, just a very typical Zhou Guanyu weekend of being miles off in qualifying and then just didn't deliver in the race as well.
The fans gave him a 1. Straight up savage.
Getting fed up.
Certainly are. Let's go to Valtteri Bottas. Started 16th, finished 19th.
I have gone for a 5 out of 10 for Bottas. It is the classic, very difficult to grade. Did amazingly well to even be fighting the midfield. During that race, he was up there. One of the only teams to do a 2-stop, which is odd. Not sure why they decided to go with that. They do like to do a pit stop, don't they, when they're with the rest of the pack.
Utterly bizarre. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Valtteri Bottas because I liked the fact he was getting that wheelie bin up around the fighting some of the cars at the start of the race. He was fighting, I believe, he got ahead of Ricciardo, was chasing down Tsunoda, got up to, I think it was P14 actually in the end. But yeah, I don't really know. Of all the races, you would think that they would go long to try and just grab some track position, but they just lock in very early, it seems like, to a 2-stop strategy, and they don't have the pace at all. So it almost feels like they're just doing test sessions at this point. But I think Bottas, he did okay. I know he finished 19th, but I feel quite harsh giving him a straight down the middle when he put nearly 35 seconds on his teammate. The fans gave Bottas a 5. Yuki Tsunoda started 11th, finished 17th. I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Yuki because it's the classic VCARB strategy of just screwing over Yuki Tsunoda by the looks of things. Pitted it on lap 14, then pitted again on lap 32. It's just bizarre. Just losing all the track positions they could possibly get and then being like, up to you, Yuki. You go and do your thing now. But you can't. It's difficult. These cars are quite closely matched in the midfield. And for Tsunoda to start 11th and finish 17th, the strategy was just, not good enough. So that's why I'm not being too harsh on him.
Yeah, I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Yuki as well. Saw a lot of people roasting him, saying he was rubbish. But yeah, if you look at his race, like you say, he had a really poor strategy. It makes no sense. I know it's the SMH strategy with the tyres of soft, medium, hard, and it was very SMH because for you to put the softs on and then go for mediums. And when you're pitting off your mediums, you're not going any longer than the people that are just doing a one-stop on the mediums. Like, where's the advantage of of that at all? Why would you not go longer and try something? Really odd from VCarb again.
Not good at all. The fans gave Yuki a 5 as well. Daniel Ricciardo started 13th, finished 12th.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Daniel Ricciardo. I think it was a respectable drive to finish P12. Finished ahead of Stroll in the Aston Martin, which you think would be a point scorer. So impressive there. Didn't have the best of qualifying compared to his teammate, but made up for it in the race and drove a good race. I still think the V-carb isn't really anywhere, so I think P12 is a good position.
Certainly, I've gone for a 7 for Daniel Ricciardo. I think that it was a decent drive, being given the much better strategy at the team, I will say. I did see some graphics going around of Ricciardo on average being 0.8 a lap quicker than Tsunoda, but you also have to take into account that there were plenty of traffic for Yuki Tsunoda to deal with, plus mobile chicanes like Kevin Magnussen and everything else. But that's not to take away from Daniel Ricciardo. I think he had a strong race. He wasn't too far away from Stroll at the end and Hulkenberg as well. Not too close to the points, but still, I think a solid result after a reasonably subpar qualifying. Yeah, good comeback for Danny Rick. So a 7 from me, and the fans gave him a 5, which I think is very harsh from the fans. So you are wrong, all of you. Logan Sargent started 18th, crashed, of course, in free practice 3, and did not start quali, and then finished the race in 16th. It is a 3 out of 10 for Logan Sargent. I know he did a race, he did a one-stop. He went round for 71 laps and then got out the car. However, that free practice 3 crash, which is not something you would usually take away from a driver, but it stopped him from literally taking part in qualifying. It was a silly error, and it put him on the back foot in a car that, in Alex Albon's hands, I know it was 3mm too wide on the floor, but it got P8 in qualifying. So there was some pace there in the Williams. So it's a massive opportunity lost for Logan. I'm not saying he would have qualified 8th, but just to be in Q2, just put yourself in a position to maybe impress. But alas, he did not, and that's why I'm giving him a 3.
I've also gone for a 3 for Logan Sargent. His race wasn't actually that bad, so 3 may seem a bit harsh, but essentially now Logan, because of Carlos Sainz signing for next year, it would be, before this incident, you'd go, well, there's absolutely no point replacing him. He can see out the rest of the year, because why get someone else in who's not going to be driving there next year? So the only way he could potentially come under more threat for losing his seat and not finishing the season is with another massive crash, and that's exactly what he did.
Potentially, because of course there were the rumours going around that James Vowles went to find out the availability of Liam Lawson, I think it was, and perhaps even Kimi Antonelli, and do they want to come in just for a half a season? We'll see. We'll just, it's more. The fans gave Logan a 4 out of 10. Alex Albon started 19th. Of course, he did qualify 8th, but got disqualified and finished the race in 14th.
I have gone for a 7.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not. I don't know. He's such a difficult one to grade, because
just
I
lock
think
in 7.
Yeah, I'm locking in 7. Because we can say if he'd started where he did, but he didn't.
Some maybes, but we deal with absolutes, Tommy.
And unfortunately, that did ruin his whole race. He might have. I personally think he would have got points if he'd started where he did, but we can't. We can't know that because he was obviously stuck in the pack. He started way down the order, and if that hadn't have happened, maybe a chance of points. Unfortunately, the DSQ, after a brilliant qualifying, really robbed him of a possible points finish.
It certainly did. I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Alex Albon as well. I'm not sure whether points were on the cards with the K-Mag incident or not, to be honest with you, because he finished over half a minute, I think it was, behind Alonso in 10th. So I think that was pretty much all scuppered after the disqualification, which was such a shame because it was such a great performance in qualifying, and I think Alex Albon did an amazing job, but sadly had to start 19th and made positions up, beat his teammate, no surprise, so that's why it's warranting a 7. And the fans gave him a 7 as well. Esteban Ocon started 15th, finished 15th, and I'm giving him a 5 out of 10 because it was a very anonymous race for Ocon. I don't feel like we really ever saw him. I think he was part of the K-Mag gaggle of cars, and that was about it, really. It was his qualifying that, similarly to Albon and those kind of drivers around him, you just get stuck in your own little battle, and there's no chance of getting up near your teammate who was having a sensational drive. So there was some pace in that Alpine, but it was all scuppered on Saturday for Ocon. So I've gone straight down the middle with a 5 out of 10.
I've also gone for a 5 out of 10 for Ocon. Very, very anonymous, yeah. When we saw what his teammate did, which we'll get onto later, he was nowhere. And, struggling. If Gasly had maybe been further down the pack, we'd have gone, oh, well, it is just the Alpine. But Gasly showed that there was pace in that car this weekend. And for whatever reason, Ocon couldn't deliver it, not only in qualifying, but also, in the race he didn't make huge progress either. So not a good weekend for Ocon.
Certainly not. And the fans gave him a 5 as well. Pierre Gasly started 9th, finished 9th.
I've gone for a 10 out of 10 for Pierre Gasly, which may seem extreme for a P9, but you can only do with your car what you can. And when everyone's finishing the Grand Prix these days, Formula A are gone. And another day when 4, 5, 6 of those drivers, which has happened in the past, even last year with Gasly, where he got the podium at this track. So it can happen, but unfortunately for him, he had one of the best drives of the year for him, and all is rewarded with 2 points. But at least he gets a 10 from Tom Bellingham in F1 Drive Ratings, which is basically a victory.
He certainly did. He's also getting a 10 out of 10 from Matt Gallagher on P1 Podcast as well, because what more could he have done? He got into Q3, he put himself in that position, and then drove fantastically well. He could have easily been passed by Alonso, but defended incredibly well against the Aston Martin. And of course he got overtaken by Leclerc and Russell, but there's no way that he really could have fought those off. But he did a fantastic job to win Formula B. The fans, however, gave him a 9. So that's, what more? What do you want to do? Win the race? Crazy. Lance Stroll started 8th, finished 13th. It's a 5 out of 10 for Lance Stroll from me, and I genuinely thought I was going to give him maybe a 7, maybe an 8. He was looking reasonably good this weekend, and he comes into the pit lane at about 150 miles an hour, locks up, doesn't really slow that down, and that kind of obviously ruined his race a little bit with the 5-second penalty. But yeah, it was a bit of an odd one, really, because he was right up there with Alonso, especially in qualifying. Obviously, he was doing really well there, messed up his final Q3 lap, but I think finishing 13th is quite the poor result for Stroll, and that's why I've gone for a 5.
I've also gone for a 5 for Lance Stroll. I don't think the Aston is a great car as it was. They look like they've slipped back into that pack again, but when you're finishing behind an Alpine, a Haas, a V-carb, it's not a great result from Stroll. So despite a very promising qualifying, you'd think points would be possible, and he didn't score that, so it's a 5.
And the fans gave him a 5 as well. Fernando Alonso started 7th, finished 10th.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Fernando. He drove a solid race, if not spectacular. I don't think he could have done any more in qualifying. In the race, maybe he could have beaten Gasly or something. So he's not delivered the absolute maximum there.
You say he drove a solid race, if not spectacular. Do you mean but not spectacular?
I say that every time. Why do I say that every time?
If not spectacular, so why not giving him a 10 then, bro?
but to not spectacular. It was a very. You can kind of look at it that it's maybe not one of his better drives but still getting a point.
I have also gone for a 7 out of 10. Wow, we are in agreement today. I think that it was a good drive. It was a point. Didn't even look like potentially that was on the cards at some points during the Grand Prix, but he managed to secure that. They don't have the race pace, sadly, and it's literally got Alonso on his hands and knees under the McLaren trying to figure out what the hell is going on in Parc Fermé. So 7 out of 10 from me, and the fans gave him a 7 as well. Oscar Piastri started third, finished fourth. This is a difficult one. I'm going to go for a 7 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri because he did still finish fourth. However, I think it was one of his poorer weekends of the year. In my opinion, second was absolutely the minimum that he should have been delivering around Zandvoort. But sadly, his qualifying, he was half a second off Lando. Of course, got a poor start as well. But I think, with more analysis, we can see that a lot of drivers on that side of the grid did have poor starts. But that being said, Norris showed that you can drive up to a car and pass. It's not in a McLaren, so it wasn't impossible. And for him to have had that tyre advantage on Leclerc and not get through, I think that's where it has to be a 7.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri as well. I think you summed it up very nicely that you can't give him much worse, even though it was frustrating to watch because you saw the pace of the McLaren in the hands of Lando, and it was not just a race-winning car, it was a very dominant race-winning car. So you think that the standard needs to be him finishing P2, and while his strategy was maybe a bit odd that they left him out longer, when he had that tyre advantage, he didn't make the moves that he needed to. So a frustrating race for Oscar Piastri, but certainly not a terrible one. I can understand maybe a few people being like, oh, he was awful, but he still got solid championship points, but he does definitely need to do better.
And the fans gave Oscar a 7 as well, so perhaps they're in agreement. Wow, a rarity. Lando Norris started first, finished first.
I've gone for a 1 out of 10 for Lando because of his awful start. No, I've of course gone for a 10 out of 10. Despite the start, you can't take it away from him because I don't think it was even a bad start. You saw what Oscar did. Strangely, I think first, third and fifth all lost places that were on the clean side, which was quite an odd one. It was more that Max got the perfect start, and even with that poor start, he's put half a second on his teammate in qualifying to get a brilliant pole. He's been one of the only drivers that's really put in an overtake on a car that's a similar pace to him as well, to fight through and then to extend the gap. Whatever you think of that car, you cannot take anything away from a driver that wins a race by 22 seconds and sets the fastest lap and puts a race-winning overtake on Max Verstappen in the process. So, has to be a 10.
I have gone for a 10 out of 10 as well for Lando, and I know that there will be comments that go, how could you possibly give him a 10 when it wasn't a perfect race because he lost the lead at the start? Tommy said it, I said it earlier in the podcast as well. That side of the grid, which is supposed to be the preferential side because it's the racing line, just didn't work for first, third or fifth. And I think that people will go, because if this was an isolated incident, which is what we are rating it on, Zandvoort, not how good is Lando at starts, I think people then think, oh, well, but he's done it before and therefore you should grade him down. No, this is one thing. He lost the lead at the start, but then kept his head down, didn't lose mental. He just drove brilliantly, passed Max, I think, on lap 17, and then to win we actually won by 13.8 seconds from Valtteri Bottas, so I should have actually given him a 7. But
he should have beaten that Kick Sauber and that rocket ship McLaren, to be fair.
He should have, yeah. He should have, yeah. But only by 13 seconds really. Is wild. But no, I think Lando, it's still a 10 out of 10 performance. It really is. And the fans agree. 10 as well from them. Let's move on now to Carlos Sainz. Started 10th and finished 5th. I've given Carlos Sainz an 8 out of 10. I think it was a very strong performance after a disappointing qualifying. Of course, he did lose a bit of time, didn't he, in practice through some issues. But bounced back beautifully, I would say. Carlos drove almost emphatically from that point. I think he finished, 7 odd seconds behind Charles Leclerc, who I think also drove an incredible race in that Ferrari. And I think I was quite happy as a Ferrari fan to see both of the drivers delivering at a level that we saw at the start of the year as well. They were the ones being the most efficient and picking up as many points as possible. And this was definitely a display of that as well, because that Ferrari was not as quick, in my opinion, as the Red Bull and the McLarens, but they really did make the most of every opportunity. So I've gone for an 8 for Carlos.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. I think it was an incredible drive to fight his way through after a poor qualifying, which he was, he only just missed out on making it through to the cutoff, and had, as you mentioned, the difficulty in with the gearbox problem in practice. So the fact that he recovered so well, and it was not a huge margin behind his teammate in the end, is very, very impressive. To finish P5, only 5 seconds off the back of the McLaren, made overtakes, made them stick. It was a really good drive. Could have been with Charles, or who knows where both of the Ferraris could have been if they'd qualified higher, because they looked very, very strong in the race.
The fans gave Carlos an 8 as well. Charles Leclerc started 6th, finished 3rd.
I've gone for a 10 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc. I think it was a amazing drive to get on the podium from P6 to finish under 3 seconds behind Max Verstappen. I know that Red Bull is not there, but yeah, a really good drive. I don't think the Ferrari is a dominant car, so for him to get on the podium ahead of a McLaren is really, really impressive.
You don't think the Ferrari is a dominant car? I agree, Tommy. I totally agree.
Yeah, we can all agree on that. I think he over-delivered. I can't actually believe he made it onto the podium, to be honest, after qualifying 6th. Normally, with Charles, we know that he can often qualify superbly well, and the car can't deliver a better performance, so he drops back a bit. But this time it was the opposite.
I am also going to fanboy and say 10 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc. Not just because he qualified obviously quite a bit better than his teammate, but then both Charles Leclerc, I'd say, and Ferrari did a great strategy. They pit a little bit earlier, they got track position, and I think Charles then managed those tyres brilliantly well, and to keep Oscar Piastri at bay for 25 laps, and to deal with that pressure is quite something to behold, I would say. So very happy as a Leclerc fan to see him back on the podium. Well, I say back on the podium. It was back-to-back podiums technically, but the first one we actually saw because he, of course, got promoted in Spa. 10 out of 10. There's literally nothing. If he'd beaten Max Verstappen, I would have said an 11, but alas, he did not. The fans gave him a 9. George Russell started 4th, finished 7th. It's going to be a 7 out of 10 for George Russell. The Mercedes was not there. I don't think Mercedes really had a clue what they were doing this weekend. They split the setups between the two drivers by the looks of things. Hamilton said he was very slow on the straights, and George had a great qualifying, so it put him in the mix to be able to score some decent points, but just didn't really have the speed and the pace. He was sliding around a lot, he said, after the race. He had high degradation. He chewed through his tyres and obviously both of the drivers had to go onto a two-stop strategy, which was surprising. But yeah, Mercedes were just off the pace. But I'm still going to give a 7 because they scored points, and I'm not sure there was much more really they could have done with the pace they had in the car.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for George Russell as well. He qualified very well to be 4th. It is concerning how in another race where his teammates qualified so much lower down than him that they've ended up together again, which has maybe become a bit of a trend with George Russell. But it's still a solid race. He chewed through his tyres, and that is less than ideal, has to be said. particularly as Mercedes have been on such great form. But yeah, it was a very bizarre strategy to give up track position at a place like Zandvoort, even when your tyres are you're struggling on tyres. It must have been a big struggle for him to sacrifice those two positions, because the DRS, we saw Piastri with a huge advantage on Leclerc and Russell himself, and couldn't get past. So it would have been hard to overtake. So very, very surprised Mercedes decided to do that.
Yes, they clearly saw the drop-off coming, and he pitted a lap later than Charles Leclerc, so it really does demonstrate how good Leclerc is. The fans gave George a 7 as well. Lewis Hamilton started 14th due to that penalty as well for blocking Perez, and then finished the race, in 8th.
I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. I think if he'd done better in qualifying, could have got a much better result. I know he finished on the back of his teammate at the end, which you can say, oh, that's quite harsh to give him a 6, but his qualifying was poor, and he has obviously finished last of what is Formula A, who were just in a completely different league, basically. So yeah, disappointing for Hamilton when he's just been so good in the previous 3 races. This was one to forget.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. I think it was a solid drive. Qualifying was poor, don't get me wrong, but he demonstrated a lot of overtakes around Zandvoort, which we know is very difficult. Of course, they were on slightly slower cars, but still to finish only a few seconds behind George Russell, I don't think I can really separate the two. I know George did qualify better, but he had worse race pace. So the fact that they both came together at the end, I think Hamilton still deserves a 7, and it was just a poor-ish weekend for Mercedes in general. The fans gave Lewis a 7 as well. Sergio Perez started 5th, finished 6th. I am going for a 7 out of 10 for Sergio Perez this weekend. It was a good performance. The Red Bull was not there. We saw that in the hands of Max Verstappen. I've seen some onboards of Max driving that car in the middle sector, and it literally looks like he's on ice. So Perez, of course, is driving the same car, and it was all right. Like, he qualified better, and he didn't fall away in the race as much. I know he obviously still finished 17 or so seconds behind his teammate, but I think that's a much more respectable performance from Perez considering his form previously, so that's why I've gone for a 7.
I've gone for a 7 as well for Sergio Perez. It was a much better drive from him. Not the most amazing drive, but I guess with how his form has been recently and in previous races, he'll absolutely take that drive every day of the week. And if he did that drive every single race, we wouldn't be having to have this debate of, is Sergio Perez
don't say it.
washed?
Don't say it.
I didn't. Well, I said we wouldn't.
You said
have to
washed.
have
You said washed. It's fine. We got away with it. I thought you were going to say the S word.
No. So, yeah, it's good. A good drive from Perez, all things considered, because yeah, the Red Bull has fallen off big time.
And the fans gave Perez a 7 as well. We did it, Tommy. We didn't say the word seat. Oh, wait, I ruined it. Right, next up, Max Verstappen. And finally, he started the race in 2nd and finished in 2nd.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. 22 seconds off the lead. He obviously, I think he delivered what he could do. But McLaren was unbeatable this weekend. But we have seen, and maybe this is Max being a victim of his own success, we have seen Max overcome that adversity and somehow still win when he shouldn't have done, which is why, for me, it can't be a 10. So yeah, it's a 9 for Max.
It's a 9 out of 10 for me as well. For Max, I think it was, again, still a very, very good performance. And for him to drag a car that he was incredibly unhappy with still to 2nd, it's still worthy of a very solid score. I know some people will go, yeah, but he's dominated races. But the Red Bull it's not as good as that anymore. It's nowhere near as good as that. You can see just by watching them drive around the circuit, and you can see in qualifying, like they've lost the advantage that they had, and if anything, they're now quite far behind McLaren potentially. We'll see what Monza has to say, but Max still gets second. He still gets a hand for a load of points, and yeah, it was good damage limitation for Max because a slightly worse race, and perhaps he falls into the clutches of Leclerc and Piastri, which is not something I thought I would ever say. So there you go. And the fans gave Max a 9 as well. Okay then, who is our P1? There's a few 10s out there. There's a few 10s indeed. I am going to give my P1 to Pierre Gasly. I believe Pierre Gasly drove fantastically well and was driver of the weekend to haul that Alpine into 9th place. So Pierre gets my vote.
I will give it to Lando Norris because I think even with the start, he has basically delivered the exact race that people thought he should do. And despite him doing that, people are still slandering him for some reason. But to win by 22 seconds from Max Verstappen, whatever car you have, is no mean feat. And it was, I think, the best drive of Lando's career. It was a great drive.
Mate, he could win by 30 seconds, and his haters would say, it wasn't 31 there, was it? Like that's how petty a lot of
it's
his
just
haters
Twitter,
are.
though, isn't
yeah,
it?
It really
There's
is.
always, it's with every driver.
Lovely social media. But let's leave it on a great note. Well done to all of our drivers. I don't know why they're ours, but to the Formula One drivers. And I'm
Especially
sure they'll all be
Zhou
tuning
Guanyu.
in. Yeah. Tommy. Why?
That's
why
what,
we,
that's
why
what
we
everyone's here
congratulating
for,
Zhou
let's be
Guanyu?
honest.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the comments of why he deserves more than a 2 out of 10. They actually do make me chuckle quite a lot with some of the top comments that all of you give. So please give and be creative with your with your feedback. And that is it. See you soon, everybody. It's Italian GP Race Week. Woo! Bye.